Good afternoon. Over the last several months, there have been media reports about a Hampton Police Division undercover operation that focused on illegal trafficking of cigarettes. There have been implications that this was a failed operation in which more than $3 million of funds were spent and that the funds were not properly used in the interest of Hampton taxpayers. These suggestions do not accurately or fully portray the operation. Today, I would like to review some key facts about that operation, discuss transparency and the release of information, present the results of the city's internal investigation, share lessons learned and recommendations, and then discuss next steps. These are the verified facts. This operation was started in June 2010 when federal officials approached the Hampton Police Division and asked the department to participate. The money for the operation came from the proceeds of cigarette operations in other jurisdictions involving the ATF, not from local revenues. Hampton police officers suspected the lead ATF agent of criminal activity and turned information over to the ATF. Hampton officers then gathered evidence to charge him. While this was going on, the operation continued. Meetings between the Hampton Police and the ATF to determine the future of the operation continued through February 3, 2011. After it was clear that the ATF had pulled out of the operation, Hampton's former police chief, Chuck Jordan, and former Commonwealth attorney, Linda Curtis, signed a memorandum of understanding in February and March of 2011. That memorandum of understanding stated that churning was authorized and provided for state-level prosecution of cases. Jordan halted the operation when a newly assigned officer alleged violation of city policy governing travel spending. Jordan asked the state police for an external investigation to determine if crimes were committed. It did not result in any charges, but found that there was no documentation of how approximately $8,000 in travel and investigative funds were spent. Jordan then ordered an internal affairs investigation to determine whether city or departmental policies were violated. All of this had already happened when the Daily Press broke the story August 2nd of this year. Hampton officials were seeking the facts to ensure accountability 6 months before the media inquiries began. Transparency and public information. The Daily Press submitted a detailed list of questions about the undercover operation. Staff's first inclination was not to answer any of these questions until the internal investigation was concluded. However, the Daily Press asserted that we were not being transparent with the public and argued that there had to be some information that could be shared. In the interest of transparency, I asked HPD staff to provide me with the information that could be released without compromising the investigation. It should be noted that this went against past practice, but we opted to share what HPD provided because the Daily Press insisted upon pushing forward with the stories prior to the completion of the investigation with or without our input. In retrospect, this was a mistake that was born out of a desire to be transparent, but nevertheless a decision that was not in the public's best interest. Here's why. When we decided to release what we could, we relied on information provided by HPD that officials believed to be true, but which had not yet been substantiated through investigation. As an example, it was believed that an audit had been conducted. We later learned what was represented by those involved as an audit was instead a review by an external accounting firm of the QuickBook accounting records. Upon the discovery of this misuse of the word audit, we immediately updated counsel and the media. This mistake led some to question our veracity and, ironically, our willingness to be transparent. So here's the crux of the challenge. If we hold off releasing information, we are told we're not forthcoming enough. But if we share partial or unconfirmed details before a thorough investigation is completed, we run the risk of providing inaccurate or incomplete information and then are labeled as not being transparent. Thereafter, I made an executive decision not to release any more information to media outlets until such information could be fully documented. Although this led to several stories about city staff not answering questions, I thought this was preferable to sharing information that could later turn out to be incomplete or possibly in error. I made a statement to the public about a month ago that I would release information from an internal investigation once it was completed, that we would be transparent at the appropriate time. I also ordered further reviews, including a thorough external review of the financial books and an external auditor examination of the policy development, enforcement, oversight, and management of the operation, a much more broad review than the internal investigation was commissioned to examine. The City Attorney and I also asked the Attorney General's office to provide guidance on the legal basis of the operation and the status of the funds involved in it. I am pleased to share today the findings of the first of those reviews, the internal investigation. Key findings from the City's internal investigation. The investigation was moved from the Police Division's Internal Affairs Office. I appointed a special investigator who reported directly to my office. Having now read that report, I can summarize these key findings. The policies and procedures used in this undercover investigation were copied from another jurisdiction in Virginia that had set up a similar churning investigation. This policy did not address the need to document the use of travel and investigative funds. However, other HPD policies require such documentation and should have been followed. The state police found the amount of undocumented travel and investigative funds to be approximately $8,000. All travel was for legitimate law enforcement purposes. However, there are questionable expenses, such as costly meals on training trips. The more expensive meals might have been reasonable and necessary for trips that involve dealing with targeted suspects. There were lax practices in terms of accountability for an operation involving so much money. The majority of the money that flowed in and out of the account was for the purchase and sale of cigarettes. Nevertheless, there was insufficient HPD oversight of the necessary operational and administrative details of this operation. Unspent travel and investigative funds were not collected. The typical records required to be kept in undercover operations by standard HPD policy were not kept in this operation. The churning account was not frozen when the operation was halted. Expenses for the undercover operation, mostly utilities, continued to be charged against the account. These have since been canceled. In addition, the City is making every effort to terminate any remaining contracted services. However, this is hampered in a few instances due to vendors' termination policies. A detailed listing of our internal investigation findings is available on our website, and I encourage any who are more interested in the details to visit the website. Now I'd like to turn to lessons learned and recommendations. I was shocked by the failure of those involved in this operation to follow normal HPD practices. There was insufficient oversight of the operation by HPD, especially given the novelty of the operation. Standard HPD practices for undercover operations were not followed. While this may be because the policies for this operation were copied from another similar Virginia-based operation, it does not excuse this operation from the normally high HPD standards. As such, there are several important lessons learned and recommendations that follow from them. First, as the City Manager, I am directing that there shall be no further churning operations conducted by HPD alone until such time as there is clear legal determination of local government churning authority. Even then, if there is ever a need for a churning operation to be conducted, the need must be specifically demonstrated in writing to the City Manager at the time, and the City Manager will then in turn require prior and continued consultation with assigned staff of the City Attorney's Office. The City Manager will also require a financial accountant be assigned to provide necessary support. All official agreements governing these operations should be reviewed by the City Attorney prior to execution, fully executed, and a copy filed with the City Attorney's Office. Number 2, specific written policies must be developed to outline specific criteria regarding the spending of churn funds, specifically to address what is considered or not considered to be reasonable and necessary to further the investigation. 3, any such operation shall be expected to follow city procurement ordinances without regard to the source of funds, and to follow generally accepted accounting principles. Number 4, Officers involved shall be expected to follow all existing city and HPD rules and regulations unless specifically exempted in writing by the Chief of Police with appropriate justification. Next steps. While the internal investigation report has brought to close one aspect of our review of this undercover operation, there are several more steps to be completed. The financial review will provide a much more detailed accounting of the funds spent in this operation, and the external review will answer broader questions about the genesis of the operation and the decisions made to continue with it once the ATF pulled out. Closing thoughts. Over the last several months, I have gone through many thoughts about this operation and the media attention brought to it. On one level, I feel as if there's been way too much attention to one operation. Our Hampton Police Division is a strong department. Our crime statistics have continued to fall over time, while our clearance rates, that is, the successful apprehension of suspects, have remained exceedingly high. And we have done this without significantly more manpower. This one case does not negate the great work that HPD does on our behalf each and every day. The great works that are never detailed in the same way by the newspaper or media outlets. While the operation was not operated perfectly, as I've noted above, and there were many things that should have been done differently, it was nevertheless entered into for legitimate law enforcement purposes. The sale of illegal and untaxed cigarettes nets big money, and big money inevitably invites a violent criminal element. It has been said that one tractor-trailer load of cigarettes sold in New York City can bring over $4 million in profit to those engaged in these illegal enterprises. The Virginia Crime Commission has documented this. In undertaking this operation, the HPD was working on an emerging crime trend that threatens not only our residents, but those all throughout the region as well. That said, as much as I believe there's been way too much focus on this one operation, I do believe things happen for a reason. It is my hope that the public will learn through this process that we are an accountable organization, that we apply appropriate levels of scrutiny to ourselves when necessary, and that we are committed to constant improvement. No organization or individual is perfect. We cannot expect our public institutions or those who serve in them to never make mistakes. What we can expect, and do expect here in Hampton, is that we conduct ourselves with integrity, transparency at the appropriate times, and with a willingness to learn from our mistakes when they do occur. Thank you.